Welcome back. Tonight we're setting sail not on a luxury cruise, not on a gleaming naval vessel, but aboard a creaking, splintering 16th century ship. One that smells faintly of salted fish, unwashed bodies, and something worse hiding beneath the deck boards. The age of exploration conjures grand images, maps unfurling, brass instruments glinting in the sun, vast oceans waiting to be discovered. But this story isn't about the captains or the kings who sent them. It's about the people below deck, the ones whose names we don't remember, the ones who did the rowing, the lifting, the dying. Tonight, we'll gently step into their worn-out shoes, feel the sway of the ship beneath our feet, and discover why this so-called golden age of adventure was, for most, an unrelenting test of survival. Let the wind calm, let the salt air rise, and let us begin. Imagine waking up in darkness. Not the kind you know, the warm darkness of a quiet room, of closed curtains and still air, but the kind of darkness that breathes, that shifts with the ship, creaks with the wood, and reeks of mildew and unwashed flesh. You re-sleeping in what passes for a bed, a swaying hammock strung between beams low enough to force you into a hunch. If you're lucky, the rats didn't chew through the canvas overnight. If you're even luckier, they didn't chew through your foot. Your shift begins before the sun rises. You haven't seen the sun in 3 days, actually. The sky has been a blanket of gray, and the sea has been rough enough to make even the veterans keep a bucket close. You pull on your damp woolen shirt, still wet from the rain that came down hard 2 nights ago. You haven't had a change of clothes since the voyage began, and that was over a month ago. The deck greets you like an insult. Rain-slicked, slippery, and freezing. The ropes are rough in your hands. You can still feel the burn of the blisters you earned hauling the sails yesterday. And the food? You line up for your ration, ship's biscuit. It's hard as a plank, infested with weevils. You pretend not to notice the little black specks moving across the surface. A smear of salted pork follows gray, sour, and tough. The water in your cup is the color of weak tea and tastes like iron and rot. They call it fresh water. It's anything but. Your stomach turns not just from the smell, but because of the constant rocking of the ship. The sea is never still, and your legs never quite forget it. On some days, that rhythm is comforting. On others, it drags you toward nausea like a tide pulling you under. Your duties are simple but endless. Haul, clean, scrub, climb, repeat. There's always something to be mended. Always a sail to adjust, and always someone shouting. Orders come from above, quite literally from officers who never seem to touch a rope themselves. You hear your name barked, and you move or risk a flogging. Yes, punishment is swift. Misstep, and you might find yourself tied to the mast, whipped with a rope soaked in seawater. Disobedience, theft, or even poor timing can earn you time in the bilge down among the foulest parts of the ship, where the waste collects and the air makes men faint. There's no such thing as privacy. You sleep among dozens of others. You relieve yourself over the side of the ship. You whisper prayers during the storms because there's nowhere to run. Then there's the scurvy. You might not even know what it is. No one truly does, not yet. All you know is that your gums bleed, your teeth loosen, and your legs ache as if filled with lead. Some men swell up like barrels, purple and stiff. Others fall where they stand, too weak to climb the rigging, too sick to eat. The ship does not stop for the dying. There's no ceremony, no burial, just a splash and silence. If the voyage stretches long, you'll run out of supplies. The biscuits crumble into dust. The salted meat turns green. The rats become competitors and sometimes meals. The wind doesn't always favor you. Sometimes you sit still for days. No wind, no motion. Just creaking wood and waiting. And waiting can be worse than action. But worse than stillness is the storm, the sea heaves, the mast groans. Sailors cling to ropes and pray to gods they forgot years ago. Lightning cracks like musket fire. Rain comes in sheets, sharp and cold as knives. And through it all, you must keep working. Hold the ropes, bail the water, climb the mast. Because if you stop, the sea takes you no someplace. No legend is written, you simply vanish. And when the sun returns, if it does, you'll still be hungry, still sore, still afraid. This is what it meant to sail in the age of exploration, not for glory, but for grog, not for riches, but for rations, not for freedom, but for fear. And somehow, despite all this, there were men who signed up again, and again, and again. As the sun sets over this first segment, we shift now from the rank and file to the man whose ambition crossed oceans and cost him everything. Now, imagine you're not a nameless sailor, but the man standing at the helm of history, Ferdinand Magellan. Portuguese by birth, stoic, calculating, and unrelentingly ambitious. A man of silence more than speeches, of long gazes at maps and stars, rather than the warm noise of taverns. He would become the architect of the first circumnavigation of the globe, but he would never complete it. Let's step softly into the cold wake of his journey. It is the year 1519. Spain is restless, hungry for glory. Portugal already dominates trade routes to the east. Magellan, disgraced by his own king, has found favor instead in the court of Charles I of Spain, a teenage monarch with imperial dreams. Magellan proposes a bold solution, not to challenge Portugal's roots, but to find a new one. A western passage to the Spice Islands, across oceans largely uncharted by European ships. 5 ships are prepared. Crews are gathered, some eager, some forced. Ships with names that will soon be whispered in taverns with awe. Trinidad, San Antonio, Concepcion, Victoria, Santiago. Magellan is made Captain General, but not without opposition. The Spanish officers resent him. They view him as a foreigner, cold, rigid, perhaps even a spy. He sets sail in September of 1519, leaving behind the familiarity of Europe for a world to find more by legend than latitude. At first there is some grace. The fleet moves down the coast of South America, but the days grow long, supplies dwindle. Tempers fray. By the time they reach Patagonia, it is winter. Harsh and gray, the land is barren, the wind whips endlessly. The men whisper of mutiny, and then mutiny becomes real. 3 ships rebel. Captains draw weapons, orders are ignored. Magellan, calculating and brutal in equal measure, regains control with a cold efficiency. He executes the leader, leaves another mutineer marooned. It is not just the sea that must be conquered. It is the hearts of desperate men. The fleet searches for a passage through the continent. They find it a narrow, winding strait where tides churn like rivers and the winds scream between cliffs. What we now call the Strait of Magellan. It is a corridor of death. Santiago is lost. San Antonio deserts and turns back to Spain. 3 ships emerge on the other side, and what they find is staggering: an endless, open ocean. They sail for 3 months without sight of land. This is not the Atlantic. This is something else, something vast and quiet. The men call it Mar Pacifico, the peaceful sea, though there is little peace aboard. Rations fail. Rats become meals. Leather bindings on rigging are boiled for broth. Scurvy sets in. Men die quietly in corners, wrapped in what dignity remains. And then land, the Philippines. Here things turn. Magellan, seeking allies in conversion, becomes entangled in local politics. He offers Spanish steel and firepower to one tribal chief in a local feud. It is a mistake. At the Battle of Mactan, Magellan marches with a small force, confident in his superiority, but the tide does not favor him. His men are overwhelmed. Retreat is called, but Magellan refuses. He is struck again and again. His armor, once shining, becomes his anchor. He falls. He is left behind. The man who sought to circle the world is buried not in ceremony, but in sand and surf, beneath the sun of an island not yet on most maps. He never sees the journey's end, but one ship does. The Victoria, under one Sebastian Elcano, limps back to Spain. In 1522, of the original 270 men, only 8 men survive. The globe has been circled. A myth has been made real. But at what cost? The world is smaller now, yes, but the shadows cast by this voyage are long. Magellan becomes a figure of contradiction, hero to some, colonizer to others, martyr of vision or victim of hubris. And while monuments are raised in his name, the sea remembers differently. It remembers the men who didn't return. The whispers in the dark below deck, the ache of hunger, the cold of wind across bare knuckles, the cost of discovery paid in rations and bones. Now from those who dared the real, we drift into the unknown. Next, we'll turn toward the ghostly legends left behind on the sea, stories of ships that floated, yet held no crew. The sea does not always give back what it takes. Some ships vanish without a trace. Others return silent, drifting, and empty. And in those rare moments when a vessel appears without a crew, without signs of life, yet entirely intact, the stories begin. We call them ghost ships, and while the phrase conjures images of flickering lanterns and spectral hands at the helm, the truth, like much of history, is quieter, more unsettling in its stillness and tragic in its details. Let us drift through the fog and explore a few such tales. We begin with perhaps the most famous of them all, the Mary Celeste. In December of 1872, the Mary Celeste was found adrift in the Atlantic Ocean near the Azores. Her sails were still rigged, her cargo of alcohol barrels largely untouched. The lifeboat was missing, yes, but the ship itself was seaworthy. Her log ended 10 days before discovery, and yet the entire crew had vanished. No signs of struggle, no distress signals. Personal belongings were still on board. Food and water remained. What happened? Theories abound. Some say it was a sudden waterspout. Others, a panicked evacuation after toxic fumes from the cargo. There were whispers of piracy, mutiny, even sea monsters, though the latter belong more to bedtime stories than the pages of maritime reports. The truth remains uncertain, and perhaps that's what keeps the Mary Celeste adrift, not on the sea, but in our minds. But this mystery is not alone. In 1947, sailors aboard Dutch and British vessels reported a strange transmission over distress channels. The voice, they claimed, was from the Orang Maiden, a ship of unknown origin. The messages were fragmented. All officers, including the captain, dead. Then silence. And finally, I die. When rescuers found the ship, they reported an eerie scene. The entire crew was dead. Faces frozen in terror, arms outstretched. Even the ship's dog lay lifeless. But before a proper investigation could begin, the Orang Medan exploded and sank. No records of its registration were ever found. Some speculate it was smuggling dangerous chemicals. Others say it never existed at all, a maritime myth born of static and salt. Still, the story endures like a shadow behind the sails. Long before radio, ghost ships took root in oral tradition. The Flying Dutchman is not a real vessel, but a maritime legend passed between sailors for centuries. A cursed ship doomed to sail the oceans forever, never reaching port. Often spotted in storms, glowing faintly in the mist, it was said to be an omen, a sign of death to follow. Some even claimed to see its crew waving desperately from the deck, their mouths open in silent screams. Historians trace its roots to 17th century Dutch nautical lore, possibly inspired by the perils of rounding the Cape of Good Hope, a notoriously treacherous stretch of water. But the story is so persistent, so vivid, it has outlived many real ships. Even Prince George of Wales, later King George V, once reported seeing it during a naval voyage in 1881. Perhaps ghost ships are not just about the vessels, but about what they represent. Fear of the unknown, the loneliness of the open sea, the reminder that for every celebrated voyage, dozens were lost to time, their names carried only by the tide. Sometimes the mystery lies not in the disappearance, but in the return. Consider the Jenny, a schooner allegedly discovered frozen in ice by a whaling ship in the 1800s. Inside, the bodies of the crew were perfectly preserved. The captain, it was said, was still seated at his desk, pen in hand, as though simply paused in his final entry. There's no confirmation of this tale. It may never have happened, or it may have, and the record was swallowed by snow and silence. In the end, the sea holds more secrets than it shares. It is a vast, shifting graveyard, and occasionally it returns what it has taken, but never with answers, only with questions and silence, just like the ships that drifted gently and eerily across the glassy surface of history. Now, as we return from the realm of mystery, we anchor ourselves in contrast. Let us rise above the deck into the world of the officers, the elite, the ones who gave orders, drank better wine, and faced different kinds of storms. By now, you've seen what it was like to live and labor below deck, where hammocks swayed over puddles of bilge water, and every breath was shared with rats and the scent of brine-soaked rope. But not everyone on board shared the same experience. Above, in the officers' quarters, a different rhythm of life played out, one still harsh, still perilous, but lined with hierarchy, privilege, and a touch more comfort. Imagine you are a naval officer in the early 16th century, a man of some education, perhaps born to a lesser noble family, or risen through connections and patronage. You wear wool, yes, but it's cleaner, finer. Your boots are polished. Your meals are served in pewter or porcelain, not from a communal pot. Your cabin, small by any modern standard, is your own. You have a desk, perhaps even a mattress stuffed with straw, not just canvas. A bottle of wine rests beside your maps. Your inkpot is full. You still rise early, but not to scrub decks or hoist sails. You rise to calculate speed, to chart course, to read the stars. Your concerns are abstract: longitude, supply inventories, crew morale. You eat better: salted beef, hardtack, and sometimes preserved fruit carefully rationed for the officers. You sip wine diluted with water, while those below drink stale beer or, if lucky, a ladle of rum. You are expected to remain calm, even when the storm throws waves over the bow. You must not panic. Your posture is part of command. Your voice must be steady even if your knees tremble in the dark. You issue orders, punishments, rewards, but always with calculation. The balance must be kept. If the men believe you unjust, they may grumble. If they believe you weak, they may mutiny. Your power, while real, is fragile. Still, you are spared the worst. You are not flogged. You are not thrown in the brig. Your health suffers, but slower. You write reports. You maintain decorum. And in doing so, you become part of the ship's memory. Your name recorded in the logs. Your death, should it come, noted in ink and witnessed. Compare this to the sailors below. Their names are often never written. They live a dozen to a room the size of your cabin. They sleep in shifts. They suffer infections without medicine, frostbite without gloves. And when they die, their bodies are thrown to the sea with little more than a whispered prayer, if that. Even their punishments are different. You might face demotion, inquiry, reprimand. They face the lash, the rope, or isolation in the bilge. For them, small crimes carry large consequences. Still, your life is not without pressure. You bear the captain's gaze, the crew's resentment, the expectations of a navy or a crown. Failure could mean disgrace, accusations of cowardice, loss of pension, or worse, becoming a scapegoat for the ambitions of greater men. You are expected to manage not only navigation, but personalities, petty rivalries, disputes over rations, murmurs of dissent, when storms come, or the food runs out, or a man falls overboard. You must maintain order not through force alone, but through presence. And when land is spotted, when the long, torturous journey finds a coast, you are the first to go ashore. Not as a conqueror necessarily, but as a representative, a negotiator, a symbol of the world that sent the ship forth. Your survival is more likely, but not guaranteed. And if the voyage is successful, you may be rewarded. A share of treasure, a promotion, a medal. But if it fails, history may forget you just the same. The distance between sailor and officer was measured in more than decks. It was a divide of language, birth, and expectation, but both shared the same storms, the same wind, the same fragile ship, groaning under the weight of ocean and ambition. And when the waves rose high enough, the sea did not distinguish between captain and cook. All were equal in the deep. As our journey nears its end, let us return from the sea to the present. The storm is past, the sails are furled, and the past recedes like a coastline in fog. Let us close. The age of exploration, for all its triumphs, was never a golden age for those who did the rowing. Beneath the grand charts and elegant names were bruised hands, cracked lips, and stories that slipped silently into the sea. Tonight, we followed their shadows through damp hammocks, over icy decks, into silent disappearances, and past officers pacing their cabins by candlelight. It is easy, in hindsight, to romanticize discovery, but history is often quieter than legend, slower, less glorious, and far more human. Now, as you lie still, let your breath fall into rhythm with the gentle roll of imagined waves. Let the past drift slowly out to sea. You are not on a ship tonight. You are safe. You are warm, and you are home. Remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Until next time, good night and sleep well.